Pursuant to House Resolution 1075, I call up H.R. 4758 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Chair recognizes. I'm sorry. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 414, H.R. 4758, a bill to repeal provisions of Public Law 117-169 relating to taxpayer subsidies for home electrification and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1075, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member, minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, or their respective designees. The gentleman from Ohio and Mr. Latta, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, each will control 30 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the legislation and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 4758.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4578, the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act, sponsored by the gentleman from Texas's 12th Congressional District. The Homeowner Energy Freedom Act repeals disastrous policies from the Inflation Reduction Act that were used to subsidize expensive mandates and implement backdoor fossil fuel bans. Today, in the United States, the dream of home ownership is out of reach for far too many Americans. In fact, 75% of households today cannot afford a medium-priced home. Provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act to force states to implement green energy building codes only served to make matters worse. It is estimated that the building codes associated with the home's rebate program raises the cost of a single-family home by $31,000. These building codes effectively prevent the use of natural gas and require expensive equipment to accommodate EV chargers and other intermittent energy sources. It is important to remember that upwards of 60% of homes utilize natural gas appliances, and that the number rises to more than 75% in colder climate states. These aren't just talking points, they're real-world impacts. Take Kansas City, for example. After adopting the latest IECC building codes, the city saw a 22% decrease in construction permits, while the surrounding community saw a 170% increase. The data is clear. The cost of a new home goes up when Democrats get their green mandates in place. If the Biden administration's so-called energy efficiency regulatory agenda was cost-effective for the American people, why they also have to have a $1 billion slush fund to pay for it. Instead of a one-size-fits-all mandates from Washington, House Republicans are focused on limiting the authority of the federal government, making it easier to build affordable homes, and taking advantage of abundant natural gas reserve beneath our nation. Importantly, H.R. 4578 builds on the important work of the Working Families Tax Cut Law by officially putting an end to these egregious authorities so future abuses cannot occur. By passing this legislation, House Republicans are continuing to address the affordability for hardworking American households and responsibly protecting finite taxpayer resources. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Republicans simply cannot help themselves. It's bad enough that they refuse to do anything to address the affordability crisis that American families are facing today, but Republicans are doubling down on bills that will drive up energy costs for families when they're simply being stretched too thin. Yesterday, we were here on the House floor debating a bill that guts appliance efficiency standards, which save families money on their power bills. And today we're back to debate the gutting of another popular program that lowers upfront appliance prices. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the 7th bill about appliances that we've debated on the House floor this past year. When I'm back home in New Jersey talking to my constituents, no one ever brings up showerhead flow or how much water their dishwasher uses. These folks want to know how we can put a stop to Trump's disastrous tariffs, which are attacks on the American people and which raise the price of absolutely everything we buy. They want to know what Congress is doing to lower their skyrocketing health care premiums. They want to know why Congress is asleep at the wheel while they struggle to make ends meet, watch their power bills go up every month, and have to start making impossible choices between paying for medicine or keeping their lights on. Well, sorry, folks, apparently Republicans in Washington don't have time for any of that. They're focused on passing another appliance bill instead. And I talk about out of touch. This bill repeals and rescinds funding for three important Department of Energy programs. First, it rescinds funding from the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. This is a $4.5 billion program created by Democrats as part of the Inflation Reduction Act to lower the upfront cost of appliance upgrades for low and moderate income families. The families get a rebate. It helps families better afford appliances for their homes, but with this bill, House Republicans are eliminating the funding for the rebate, and again, they are driving up costs on American families. Now, the second thing this bill does is to rescind funding from a program designed to help with building energy code adoption. That might sound a little obscure, but it's also important from a cost point of view. And third, they repeal a program that provides assistance for contractor training. Even these two programs that might seem less important than the rebate are still programs that reduce costs for consumers. And I cannot stress it enough. This bill only worsens the affordability crisis for American families. Trump promised to cut Americans' power bills in half during his first year, but that didn't happen. In fact, electricity prices are up 15% and increasing twice as fast as inflation just since Trump took office. More than 80 million Americans are struggling to pay their utility bills, and even though these price increases are a direct result of Republican policies, today House Republicans are choosing to double down. Rather than working on constructive solutions that help Americans, they're choosing to cut funding that helps homeowners and businesses save money. There's a reason why electrification rebates are popular. Again, these are rebates that help people. Some states have already rolled out their rebate programs and are seeing significant interest. And despite how Republicans try to frame them, rebates are not mandates. Rebates are optional, and they provide discounts to families who have crunched the numbers and made the decision that electrification would help them save money. But Republicans want to take away that choice at a time of skyrocketing energy costs and energy demand. So I strongly urge my colleagues to vote against this bill. The programs that this bill targets are designed to lower costs, create jobs, and help Americans across the country. I only wish that Republicans cared more about that than wasting floor time with ridiculous anti-efficiency, anti-consumer bills. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I yield as much time as the gentleman can consume. The gentleman from Texas 12th District, the sponsor of the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. I rise today in support of my legislation, the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act. Our nation is facing a housing affordability crisis. When I was growing up, the median age of a first-time homebuyer was 29 years old. Today, it's 40 years old. Since then, the median home price has increased by more than 400%. As a result, nearly 75% of U.S. households cannot afford the typical price tag of a new home. Homes are simply too expensive for many Americans, and burdensome federal government regulations are a major driver of these rising costs. The Biden administration mandated mountains of red tape dictating what Americans have to put in their homes. Specifically, they imposed costly climate change codes, restricting which appliances families can use to cook their food and heat their homes. The Homeowner Energy Freedom Act would change that. This bill is simple, but its implications are significant. First, it helps reduce the cost of building new homes. Regulations account for nearly 25% of the price of constructing a single-family home. Instead of improving housing affordability, the federal government is burying the dream of home ownership under 6 feet of red tape. Some of my Democrat colleagues argue that green energy regulations save homeowners on utility bills. But if electric appliances are so cost-effective, why do Democrats need to allocate billions in taxpayer money to mandate their installation? In reality, these green energy regulations fail to lower utility costs, and they increase the overall cost of new homes. Home builders estimate that these energy regulations have increased the price tag of a new home by up to $31,000. Second, this bill restores Americans' freedom to make their own choices in their own homes. Americans don't need the Democrats and Washington, D.C. bureaucrats dictating which appliances they can or cannot have in their own home. The federal overreach threatens the American dream of home ownership. For generations, Americans have worked hard, raised families, and built their lives in their homes. Home ownership remains foundational to financial security and long-term prosperity. Americans are calling on Congress to improve housing affordability. We must act to ensure hardworking Americans can raise a family in a home of their own. We must repeal these costly green energy mandates. We must reduce the cost of new homes. We must return consumer choice to homeowners. And we must restore the American dream of home ownership. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I yield to my colleague from Florida, I just wanted to debunk one of the statements that was made by my colleague from Texas. My Republican colleague and others, actually both of the speakers on the other side, repeatedly cited the National Association of Home Builders estimate that building a home to meet the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code standard would add as much as $31,000 in cost to a new home. This is flawed. It's intentionally misleading. Republicans are trying to demonize energy codes that actually save Americans money and deliver increased comfort, health, and climate benefits, all to prop up their fossil fuel buddies. This figure of 31,000 originally came from Kansas City, and when you actually analyze the cost breakdown, it includes information or costs that are not required by the 2021 Energy Code. For example, the costs include over $18,000 for double wall construction, but the code doesn't require double wall construction. It includes $3,000 for a ventilation energy package. The code does not require this package. It only requires one of several energy options, like energy-saving water heaters. So I could go on debunking these claims, but hopefully you get the point that this fictitious figure is just meant to mislead the public about energy building costs. And with that, I'd like to yield now such time as she may consume to the ranking member of our Energy Subcommittee, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member for yielding the time. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 4758. It is a bill that is going to sock it to the pocketbooks of our hardworking neighbors back home. Republicans appear to be doing everything they can to stick their heads in the sand when it comes to the affordability squeeze. Higher costs, that's the last thing that our neighbors back home need right now. And yet, this relentless march by Republicans to bring bills to the floor that rip away savings from people who really could use it right now. What does this bill do? It guts a very popular common sense initiative that hardworking Americans rely on. In 2022, the Congress passed some rebates to help people afford home appliances through 2 home energy rebate initiatives that help lower their electric bills. The first is the Home Efficiency Rebate Program, or HOMES. That's a rebate to households that conduct whole house energy saving retrofits. That means that our neighbors can increase insulation in their homes or improve their HVAC systems. The second is the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program, or HERE. That provides rebates to upgrade electric panels, conduct weatherization or purchase an appliance like an electric water heater or air conditioner. Because we know oftentimes people need a little bit of help with that upfront cost. If they can get a little help to afford an upgraded appliance, that is going to save them money in the long run. So it's just a real head scratcher while Republicans are bringing this bill in the midst of an affordability crisis. But I think when you look, if you listen to the State of the Union last night, that's a little bit illuminating, because the president said everything's great in America. He solved it. There's no affordability squeeze. Look at our economy is roaring. Everybody's doing great. That's not what I hear from my neighbors back home in Florida. Everything costs more. In fact, 80 million Americans are struggling to pay their utility bills. Electric rates across the country are up by 13% on average and higher in a lot of places. And then these illegal, arbitrary tariffs have added to this affordability squeeze. Many analyses have it at the average household paying $1,700 more per year because of the Trump tariffs. And Republicans in Congress have been supportive the entire way along. And even after the United States Supreme Court ruled last week that the tariffs, these high import taxes, the highest in 100 years on households making their groceries, their appliances, everything costs more. Even after the Supreme Court said they're illegal, you don't have the authority to do that, the president doubles down. And he says, oh, yes, I do. And in fact, I'm going to inflict more pain. And Republicans last night in this chamber cheered more taxes on hardworking Americans. So this relates directly to the bill that we're debating today, because we're talking about affordable appliances. And you know what tariffs have done to the cost of appliances? Tariffs have driven a steady rise in appliance pricing, hitting American consumers with higher costs for essentials like refrigerators, washers, dryers, dishwashers. And because most appliances rely on imported steel, aluminum, and foreign-made components such as motors and control boards, tariffs on both finished goods and parts have pushed up production and import costs. Retailers and manufacturers are working on very slim margins. They have passed along all of these increases directly to shoppers, leading to some of the fastest price jumps in years. And now that the president said, I thumb my nose at what the Supreme Court has told me, and is now inflicting new pain and new taxes on America, new tariffs, that's going to keep appliances, the prices of appliances elevated at a time when people are really under the gun and feeling the squeeze. They're going to make it harder to replace or upgrade big-ticket items. And the result is this persistent squeeze on family budgets with no meaningful relief in sight. And people will tell you this. They'll say, oh, okay, I might have listened to that speech last night, but they are out of touch. Everything is not all well. The affordability crisis is not solved. And now you bring a bill to the floor that makes it harder, that makes everything more expensive for people back home. 54 states have already are already getting these rebate initiatives out, getting the money into the pockets of consumers. Governors and state energy offices have dedicated their own funding and staff time, and they're working with the Department of Energy. This is something that Americans of all political stripes will support, and they need it. Texas received $689 million to help Texans afford new appliances and weatherize their homes. Ohio received $259 million. You're going to rip that away. Kentucky received $134 million. In Georgia and North Carolina, where rebates are already in place, participating families are saving over $1,000 a year. Now, that doesn't make up for the tariffs, the pain inflicted, the higher costs that people are paying, but it sure will help. Every dollar will help working families right now. In Florida, I know my neighbors are very eager to take advantage of the $346 million in cost savings that will come under these initiatives. We received it just last week. And you know why it's particularly important to parts of the country that have experienced disasters and hurricanes? Because I'll tell you a story. I was meeting with a small business owner and homeowners last week that are still recovering from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. One of my neighbors, Rebecca, is a retiree on a fixed income, living in a 960 square foot home in St. Petersburg. And when Helene hit, she lost her car, her furniture, her washer and dryer. She lost her air conditioner. And then what happened in the subsequent months? Electric bills went up, up, up. Last year, $170 in May, $258 in June, $314 in July. And as people try to rebuild, they could really use these rebates as they're replacing their appliances. Why do Republicans want to make life so much harder and more expensive? I guess because they believe what the president said last night, that everything's great, everything's fine, nothing to see here. Well, that's out of touch. It's really out of touch. For all of these reasons, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to the committee if the House rules permit it. I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would require the Secretary of Energy to certify that implementation of this act would not increase costs for homeowners and renters. So I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our neighbors are suffering an affordability crisis. They want policymakers in Washington, D.C. to help solve problems and bring down the cost of living. Every time the president and congressional Republicans deny that this is happening and say everything is great and everything is well, you're doing a real disservice to hardworking American families. Tariffs, higher electric bills, cost of housing, the cost of groceries. You can't turn a blind eye to it, and you shouldn't. What you should do is adopt my motion to recommit and defeat this bill. Vote no. Our neighbors deserve better. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no further speakers. I'm not sure if the gentleman's ready to close.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to yield some time briefly to Mr. Hoyer, if I could.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise in opposition to this bill, and I adopt the comments of my distinguished colleague from Florida. But I also want to speak on behalf of a unanimous consent that we'll request. The President last night spoke to the nation. And one of the things he said was that TSA, Coast Guard, FEMA are not operating. That is accurate. They're not operating because we have a disagreement in this House between Republicans and Democrats on whether those agencies ought to be funded. We do have a deep and severe disagreement with the administration with respect to how ICE and CPB are operating contrary to the Constitution, contrary to the laws of our country, and contrary to the norms of police departments all over this country, which have resulted in the deaths of a number of American citizens, egregiously and, in my view, illegally. That unanimous consent request will simply say that we will fund all of those agencies that are within the Department of Homeland Security are not controversial. Not because we absolutely agree with every expenditure, but we have come together on a consensus. And the American people, Mr. Speaker, ought to know that Democrats are prepared to vote for the spending of TSA, of FEMA, of Secret Service, of Coast Guard, and every other agency that is acting within the bounds of the Constitution and acting legally within the bounds of the Constitution. So I would ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, this hand-wringing about TSA perhaps shutting down, or employees of TSA working without pay. They should not be doing that. We ought to open up TSA. We ought to open up Coast Guard. We ought to make sure they're critical employees, so they're working but without pay. But we ought to pay them. And we ought to have FEMA open, as the President said last night, so that it can serve the American people, particularly at a time when we've just had a gargantuan storm in the Northeast. So I rise in strong support of a unanimous consent that the chair of the ranking member of the Appropriation Committee, Ms. DeLauro, will be asking for. This is a unanimous consent that makes sense, it makes common sense, and on which we have agreement. What we disagree with is the unconstitutional, illegal, unlawful, and death-causing activities of an out-of-control agency at the instance of the President of the United States. So I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, let's make sense. Let's say yes to what we agree on. And I thank the gentlelady from Connecticut, the leader on our side of the aisle of the Appropriations Committee, for initiating this effort. I took this time because I'm not sure we're going to have time on the other bill. But I urge my members on the Republican side of the aisle, do not object to this unanimous consent, because it does what you say we ought to be doing. Funding those agencies, those operations, those very critical activities for the American people on which we agree. What the American people are so frustrated about is we seem to not even be able to move on that on which we agree. Let's show them that, yes, we can agree. And let's also recognize and admit that we have a difference of opinion on a very critical issue, an issue at the heart of our Constitution, of how we treat individuals in this country. That we don't go around arresting people with masks on and putting them in unmarked cars and disappearing them. That we don't have heavily armed troops coming out of cars into the streets of our cities to confront a woman who's driving her car alongside and heckling the police. We may not agree with that, but it is certainly within the bounds of our Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no reason that we ought to have TSA shut down, FEMA shut down, Coast Guard shut down, Secret Service shut down. And they're really not shut down because we're making them work, but we're saying, by the way, we can't pay you. If you get up and you say Democrats are shutting down those agencies, you are not telling the truth. Because Democrats are prepared right now to pass legislation, which will be offered by the gentlelady from Connecticut, to fund everything but that on which we disagree. Isn't that reasonable? Isn't that what we ought to be doing as legislators, as Americans, as people who have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of this country? I urge my colleagues, particularly my Republican colleagues, do not object, because your objection will be to continue to hamper the agencies on which we agree that are serving the American people. If the gentlelady from Connecticut would like me to yield to her, I'd be glad to do that. You want to use this?
Mr. Hoyer, I think I have to yield to.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
The
thank
gentleman
you.
from New Jersey.
And I will yield now to the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
I want to thank the gentleman from Maryland for standing and speaking today about something that should be a bipartisan effort, a unanimous consent effort to make sure that those public servants who fight every single day come to work, play by the rules, and in this body there is agreement that we need to fund TSA, and we need to fund the Coast Guard, and we need to fund FEMA and Secret Service and cybersecurity. Those are integral parts of our government. They serve a great purpose to the American people, and there is not a shred of difference between Democrats and Republicans on those issues. And why then? Why then can we not, by unanimous consent, say, let us fund these agencies through the rest of the year, and where we have serious disagreements with ICE or CBP, and we can, on a parallel track, be able to address those issues. I could not be more proud to have worked on a bipartisan basis to pass 11 appropriations bills, 11 of our appropriations bills, reclaiming the power of the purse for the Congress as it should be, and reclaiming, that is what we're doing here with making sure that we can fund these agencies through the rest of the year. There are serious difficulties with ICE. The American public gets it. They understand it. This is a marauding band of masked and armed agents all over our streets and terrorizing our communities and being responsible for the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. It is unconscionable. And the Democrats have made reasonable demands for reform. Reforms that have been in the public view now for a very long time. How about we don't detain and deport American citizens? How about we unmask? How about body cameras? How about a warrant before you knock in somebody's door? What about training? Serious training, not 47 days of training. These are absolutely bedrock reforms that can be done, and we can overhaul an agency, make it run as it is supposed to be run. Do we need to have border enforcement? Yes, but this is out of control. And that's the debate that we should be having and the negotiation that we should be having, not on the agencies that play such a role. Look, we just have serious snowstorms all over the country. My state of Connecticut declared an emergency. Aren't we going to indicate that we have going to deal with FEMA and help people out? Very simply speaking, it's a simple premise. Let's take the Department of Homeland Security bill, where we have major agreement on the bulk of the bill. Let us pass the bill in that context and fund those agencies, take care of those folks, and fight for demands on reforming ICE and CBC. I yield back.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Can I close at this point?
We have no further speakers.
You have another speaker?
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves.
We have no further speakers, so if you're ready to close, we are too. Yep.
All right. Thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the President finally admitted that the people are concerned, or the American public are concerned about price increases. And if you care about affordability, why would you repeal a rebate program that helps Americans with their electricity bills, which is exactly what this bill unfortunately does? It repeals the rebate. Now, that rebate is at the point of sale, so when you go out and buy an appliance or a heat pump or something, you actually get a discount on the sale price. That's the rebate at the point of sale. So this bill targets this very popular electrification rebate program, a program that is already active in 12 states plus the District of Columbia. Those states include North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, and Indiana. and all but 2 states in the country have applied for the program funding. So what they're essentially doing is eliminating this rebate program, which is clearly popular, in the very middle of it, while Americans are taking advantage of it. So I just think it's disingenuous to portray this as some kind of red state or blue state program. It's popular across the board amongst Republicans and Democrats. And with this bill, House Republicans are voting to rip funding away from 12 states that have active programs and against the interests of 46 total states who've applied for the program and are about to put it in the process. At full deployment, the rebate program is expected to deliver $275 million in annual energy savings, with participating families projected to save about $1,000 a year. And the installation of these appliances is projected to support 23,000 jobs. So why are you eliminating a program like this that puts money back into Americans' pockets when they're concerned about affordability? To date, electrification rebates have served 16,000 homes and resulted in $7.6 million in annual savings, and this is across only the 13 active programs that I mentioned. These programs are all designed in unique ways to meet states' needs and local contexts, and obviously Americans are interested. So if Republicans are successful in repealing this rebate program, they're not just scrapping some hypothetical program. They're removing real dollars from real states, real people, including the states that they represent. And again, we have this affordability crisis. Why eliminate a rebate that puts money back in Americans' pockets? So I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, returning to the legislation before us, we're here to debate 4758, the Homeowners Energy Freedom Act. And again, I want to thank the gentleman from Texas' 12th Congressional District for sponsoring this legislation. This legislation is about reversing the damage caused by President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act's aggressive regulatory agenda and taxpayer funding spending spree. Whatever happened to the free market? What's happened to consumer choice? Housing affordability is a critical issue facing the American people. You look at the numbers. The costs associated with the IRA programs this bill seeks to repeal significantly add to the price of the new homes and lead to higher energy bills for the American people. According to the Federal Reserve, median home prices have skyrocketed over the past decade, with the largest increase from 2020 to 2022, which saw a 40% increase in median homes. When you talk about the home rebates that we're talking about here today and who's getting them, according right here, provides taxpayer subsidies for households earning over 150% of the median household income for the area. So the data from 2024 shows that the median income in the District of Columbia was $104,800, meaning that households in Washington making up to $156,000 can receive taxpayer subsidies and to upgrade their appliances. And the same numbers in 2024, median income for Massachusetts was $113,900, meaning that households making up to $170,850, which is nearly double the nationwide median household income, or can qualify. H.R. 4758 brings back the dream of home ownership back to millions of Americans. And oh, by the way, let's talk about electricity costs again. We talk about this a lot. Reliable power, affordable power. When you look at the increases, where's it at? It starts in Maryland and goes to Maine. It's California. If I lived in those states, as I've said before, I'd call my legislators in those states and say, what are you doing out there? What's the governor doing? So look where those states are and look where the affordability crisis is in this country. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired.